The principal right that the deal conferred, and we're talking here of not only UK citizens in Europe but also EU citizens in the UK, was the right to continue to reside in the country where you're residing at Brexit. That will be guaranteed if the deal is made, and you'll be entitled to apply for permanent residence or its equivalent under the deal after 5 years of being here. So those of you who already have soggiorno permanente will be able to convert that into the new right, if you like, and those of you who haven't yet done the 5 years that you need to get soggiorno permanente will have the right to apply for it after a certain amount of time. There is an issue about the procedure to be followed, which is actually more important than it would seem, being largely procedural. The United Kingdom, from the very beginning, said this is all a matter of our immigration laws, and we wish the discussion to be about our immigration laws. And the EU said, no, 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 this is all about preserving residence rights of EU citizens, which they already have. The UK won that dispute, and there is a very long section, which is now number 19 in the Withdrawal Agreement, which deals with applications for residence rights and the procedure to be followed. In the case of the UK, everyone who is resident there at the moment as an EU citizen is going to have to reapply for a new status called settled status, which will give them the right to remain, but it's following a new application process. I don't want to make it sound too difficult, because there are provisions in the agreement which say this agreement has to be simple, it has to be not too expensive, and there is a presumption which the authorities who are administering the system have to apply, which is that you're to be granted your status unless there's good reason not to do so. But there are still issues which arise, and there are still issues in the UK, for example, as to whether people have been exercising their European Union rights, or whether they are in there without effectively having been in accordance with the EU rights. So, for example, if they didn't have health insurance, if they didn't have a minimum income, things like that. There are issues which have not entirely gone away. Unfortunately, in the course of the negotiations, it was agreed that European countries should be able to apply the same system if they want to. So, under the agreement, the European countries have been given two choices. Either they can simply say, as in the case of Italy, for example, everyone who comes here has to be registered, everyone who's been here 5 years has a right of permanent residence. It's a fully registered system, if you like, unlike the UK, which has never registered people. So in countries like that, it is open to the country to say, that's good enough, we've got them all registered, we don't need to do anything more. All we need to do is to issue a new card which says they are British citizens who were properly registered before whatever the cut-off date is, either in all likelihood the 31st of December 2020, the end of the transition period. So that's one possibility which countries have. We have been in discussion with the Italian government about this. They are due to make an announcement. They've been promising to make an announcement for some time. They have actually privately told us what they're planning to do, but strictly on terms that we didn't make it public. I'm sure the same is true with the embassy. But we're waiting for a public announcement so that people know where they stand, whether they're going to have to reapply or whether they're okay without going through any further processes. So that's the first right, if you like, that the Withdrawal Agreement gives citizens. The second one relates to work. Those are people who are working in a particular country, whether residing there or not, so you could be a cross-border worker, will continue to have the right to work in that country where they're doing so at Brexit. The important point about these two rights, the right to reside and the right to work, is that they are confined to the country where you are exercising them at Brexit, or rather at the end of the transition period. You lose your right of freedom of movement, which you have at present, to say, well, my job has made me redundant in Italy, but there's a similar job I'd like to go after in France. You will not have that right after the end of the transition period. And that is very important for many people in Italy. We did a survey actually, and quite a lot of the people who are resident here really valued that right and needed it in order to provide a living for their families. It's even more important probably for people in the north of Europe, where, for example, if you think of those who live in Luxembourg, Belgium, Germany and France, very, very closely related countries, where there's been an awful lot of physical movement for the purpose of work. And also an awful lot of people provide services in more than one country. That's not going to be possible after the end of the transition period. So these are big losses that we've incurred, and those are the most unsatisfactory aspects of the withdrawal agreement. Other issues which concern people are healthcare, particularly for pensioners. As you probably know, you get your healthcare if you're a pensioner living in, a UK pensioner living in Italy. You get your healthcare from the National Health Service of Italy, but it's paid for by the UK. That will continue under the withdrawal agreement. You get your UK pension if you're a UK pensioner, and every year it is increased, as are the pensions of any pensioners living in the UK. Britain has an unhappy relationship with people who leave its shores. After 15 years, you lose your right to vote. If you go to most countries in the world as a pensioner, you lose your right to annual increases. Those, for example, who go to Australia do not get an annual increase because they have deserted La Patria, let's say. Under EU law, under the terms of the EU social security provisions, you are entitled to have your pension increased, and under the withdrawal agreement that entitlement is to continue. Another very important thing, not for pensioners but for people of working age, is that if you have moved from one country to another in Europe, you've made your social security contributions, they will be aggregated under an EU aggregation scheme that exists at the moment and will continue to exist in the future if the withdrawal agreement holds up. It's an important point. For example, in Italy, if you've contributed to the pension scheme for less than 20 years, you have no rights at all. So if you're a person who spent maybe 15 years in Italy after 10 years in Germany and 5 in France, you will have a pension right which you would otherwise not have. And finally, of the positives of the withdrawal agreement is the mutual recognition of professional qualifications. So people who have come with a UK qualification and set up a business or a profession in Italy will continue to be able to do so if their right to do so was recognised before the end of the transition period. So, for example, one of our committee members is a lawyer practicing in Rome. She's dual qualified avvocato and English solicitor. She came with her English solicitor qualification. She went through the process to have that recognised by the Rome bar, and she is now entitled to practice as an Italian avvocato in Rome as a result of this mutual recognition scheme. She will continue to have that right. There is a very strange exception for a lot of, it's actually for lawyers, which is that if you didn't re-qualify effectively, if you didn't apply for admission to the profession in the country where you're living, but simply relied upon your original home qualification, as you were entitled to do in the case of, for example, lawyers, that will no longer be recognised. You have to go through the process of re-qualifying. So the big losses under the withdrawal agreement are freedom of movement, which I've mentioned, and that includes questions like, do children of British families living in Italy have the right in future to go to university in another EU country, or will they have to go through some further hoops? What will be the situation of, again, future children of British families presently living in Italy if they want to go to study in the UK? Will they have to pay home fees as they do at present, or will they have to pay international fees, which, as any of you who looked at that question will know, are unaffordable for most people? That's the freedom of movement issue. The other big issue, which is a problem, is something called Surinder Singh. Surinder Singh is the name of a case concerning the right of a citizen to take their foreign spouse, I use it in that general way, back to the United Kingdom if they want to do so. So let's take the example of the chair of British in Europe. A British solicitor living in Germany, married to a German husband. She's in fact now a dual citizen. But if she wants to go back to look after her mother, who's 80, she would not be able to take her German husband with her because she wouldn't be able to meet the income requirements of UK immigration law. And that works both ways. So in countries which have quite restrictive immigration rules, there's a real problem of taking your spouse with you if you go back to your country of origin. The other thing I should mention, something which we pushed for and not got, is that it concerns your rights if you leave your residence. If you've been resident in a country under the Withdrawal Agreement and you've got permanent residence rights there, you can be away from the country afterwards for up to 5 years without losing your rights. But if you're away for more than 5 years, for example, for work, just think of a student, for example, who does a first degree and a master's and possibly a doctorate as well. If you're away for more than 5 years, you would lose your right to return to that country, which I think is a serious omission and a major problem. But we pushed very hard, and in fact, to be fair to the United Kingdom government, they pushed for an exchange of these two rights, the right of freedom of movement for all of us living in Europe in exchange for indefinite right to return to EU citizens living in the UK. But I think Mr. Barnier and his team would not have it. I don't think it's actually an EU-wide resistance. I think it's the Commission took the view they were not prepared to give that for reasons which they've never made clear. They've given reasons, but they don't make any sense. Okay, that's the deal.